welcome back everyone to our new episode of the podcast of our magazines, Keys and Recording Magazine, brought to you by Korg and KRK. Our today's topic is the sampling of an instrument, and not just any type of instrument, but the electric piano. And our guests today are Jay Graydon, Peter Olofsson, and Stefan Olofsson, who've all been involved in the sampling process of the instrument. So welcome, guys. Cool to have you on here.
Hey, Christoph.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. This is actually the first episode of our podcast that has more than one guest, so I think it'd be a good idea for our listeners to figure out who is who and to kind of get to know your voices by a short introduction of yourself. And so Jay, why don't we start with you? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, I started as a studio guitarist in 1969, and for about 10 years, I was a first call guitarist and played on a lot of records, so many hits. Then from there, in the early 80s, well, actually the very late 70s into the 80s, I started producing and writing full time. And I would still do record dates for friends here and there. And of course, I played on my own records. And I was an artist. David Foster and I had a deal on RCA, and the album's called Airplay. And it still sells well, especially in Japan. And I've produced a lot of artists. If you don't mind going to my website, if you want to check out my history, it's www.jgraydon.com. And along the way, I've won 2.5 Grammys. And we'll get to the half Grammy in a second.
I was going to say, that's interesting.
Yeah, well, this is brand new. This is something you'll hear about it in a second. I've won a couple of Grammys along the way. Best R&B Song of the Year, co-written by myself. After the Love Has Gone was the first one, written by myself, David Foster, and Bill Champlin. And then Turn Your Love Around, co-written by myself, Steve Lukather, and Bill Champlin. And I've also been nominated 12 times in the top 5 category for Album of the Year, Record of the Year, Producer of the Year, Engineer of the Year, all kinds of arranging nominations. And the year that I was up for Producer of the Year and Arranger of the Year and a couple of more, Thriller was nominated, and it just swept. I had no chance of winning anything, man, and that was my shot at Producer of the Year. So, oh well. Anyway, I have also done artists. I've also been an artist with a group called Planet 3. That's me, Cliff Magnus, and Glenn Ballard, and that did well in Japan. And I'm a solo artist. I've done an album called Jay Graydon, Airplay for the Planet. That's loaded with great singers, great songs. And then Randy Goodrum and I are JAR, capital J, small a, capital R. Okay, let's get to the half a Grammy. One year, when I was producing the Manhattan Transfer, I co-wrote a tune based off the Twilight Zone theme with Alan Paul called Twilight Zone, Twilight Tone. And we were nominated for Best Arrangement for a Duo or More Singers. And during that project, Janice Siegel, one of the singers in the group, was arranging Birdland, and she was having trouble figuring out chord voicings to different sections of the song. And she'd come up to me and she'd go, Jay, what are the changes here? And I pride myself with good ears. I've spent my whole life learning relative pitch and practicing it all the time. And I'm a closet jazzer, so I know all the hip voicings and all that. So I'd go, it's easy, Janice, and I'd write it out for her. Well, this happened about 4 or 5 times. She'd say, Jay, what are the changes to this section? I don't know what they are. So anyway, I actually co-arranged the song. So when the album was done, she said, do you want co-arranging credit? And I stupidly said no, not having any idea she would be nominated in the same category as Twilight Zone, Twilight Tone. Well, she won, which means we won. I've changed my mind. My answer is yes. Now I want arranging credit 40 years later.
Oh, no.
And I'm actually going to call her. She won't mind. I'm going to see if I can actually grab another Grammy out of this, because I'm also going to start a teaching site online on a YouTube channel, and it's going to be very educational. You can ask Stefan and Pepe as far as my knowledge of recording and guitar. I have a lot to teach, and I humbly say I'm very innovative. I've come up with techniques most people never even think of. And so I'm going to get into this deep. And I'm also going to do a video, an interview with Rick Beato. Do you know who Rick is? Rick's very famous. He does YouTube videos all the time. And he's a great educator. And I'm really going to do a really good job in this interview with him, because it's basically a pitch for my YouTube channel. He gets a lot of followers. He's got sometimes up near 1 million hits on these, you know, his videos and his interviews. So anyway, that's what it's leading to. I want to teach, and I'm going to. So with that in mind, that's where we're at. Let's ask the other guys.
Cool. Very interesting, Jay. Thanks. Yeah, for that short rundown. Obviously you've experienced a lot of different musical situations, and I'll definitely look out for that. It'd be interesting checking out your channel and seeing what you're approaching and what kind of topics you're approaching. So I'll definitely keep an eye out for that. Thanks.
For anybody that's into recording with a DAW system or an analog system, they're going to learn stuff they had no idea existed. And I mean, I really got deep into this. Craig Anderton and I once wrote a book, and we wrote over 3,000 pages, but it was right in the transition of analog to digital. So by the time the book was getting near done, we would have had to have rewritten the whole thing, and we just said, pass. And we cut it up and used it for a bunch of different magazine articles. And we actually won a Maggie for one of our articles called Bass Meets Studio, or Studio Meets Bass. And no, we didn't win, but we were nominated. We were in the top 5. And that's like the Grammys of magazines. But anyway, let's see what else. I was going to say something else, but since I'm old, I forgot. So let's move on to the other guys, and we'll get back to me in a minute.
Cool. Yeah. So I don't know, Stefan, how about you? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, yeah, sure. I'm a Swedish musician, and I'm 50% of the group called State Cows, which is a Swedish yacht rock band.
Okay.
One of the few, I guess. And in the past, we had as guests, among others, we had Jay Graydon as a guest. Apart from that, I play in a jazz trio here where I am right now in Chania in Crete, in Greece. And I do jazz piano lessons online.
Okay.
And I am here now is because I've done a demo for the famous E plug that we'll talk about later. I just want to point out I wasn't involved in the actual sampling process of this plugin. I was just doing a demo for it. But
okay. Well, still cool. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah, that's it.
So cool. Thanks, Stefan. And last but not least, we have Peter Olofsson. Peter.
Thank you. I'm Stefan's brother, and I play drums and a little bit of keyboard, and I've always had a big interest in Rhodes pianos.
Okay.
I used to have one all the time, but so I played a little, but I think I was chasing sounds and adjusting even more maybe. And I got very interested in this sound because in the sound of the E, because I heard it on all these records, and I couldn't believe why I couldn't get my piano to sound like that, no matter how much I tried. And I continued, and it was until that my mother started this homepage, and yes, this is how it started. I asked a question about this piano sound to Jay through my mother.
Okay.
And that's where I learned about the E first. And the funny thing, the response to this question ended up on all over internet over the years.
Really?
When people ask for the E, that Jay's response comes up in different forums.
And what was that question?
Yeah, how did you get the electric piano sound on the on the Al Jarreau albums? Because it sounds like it comes from the same piano. I can't get my piano to sound like that.
Okay, interesting. That's kind of a funny coincidence.
Yeah.
So, do you play in the same band as Stefan, or?
Yeah. Yes, I play drums in Steakhouse. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So, now, Stefan and Peter, you guys said that you're from Sweden, and Jay, you're from the US. So, how did you guys even end up meeting? Like, was it just due to the forum, or Peter, you said that your mother did kind of know Jay Graydon before that, or how did you guys end up being together?
Well, it was after Jay Graydon All-Star Band toured Sweden in 1994 and 1996, and we met first time there in a record store in this city, Umeå. And at the same time, internet was going public. It was becoming a big thing, and my mother was very into. She wanted to learn about doing coding homepages.
Okay.
And we all have we always loved Jay Graydon's productions, his music and guitar playing. And she just thought, I'm going to do Jay Graydon's homepage, because it was in the start when everybody was getting homepages, their own homepages. So that she just started building the homepage, and Jay found out, and that's where it started.
Okay, so she actually just she did the homepage before even asking Jay, and then you, Jay, like, did you see the website by accident, or did she approach you, or how did that?
This is a great story, Christoph. Okay, so I met these guys in a record store. I'm signing autographs on albums when
And that was in Sweden at that tour.
Umeå, yes.
Okay.
Umeå is very north. I mean, you could probably throw a rock and hit the North Pole from where they live. So anyway, when they walked in, they all had on T-shirts with the Airplay album stenciled on their shirts, the whole family. And I'm talking about their mom, Cherston, their dad, Lage, and of course, Stefan and Peppy, who's also known as Peter, by the way. And I think your sister, right, guys? Your sister was there too?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, right. So
Cool.
we had talked for a while. I could see you guys were very avid fans, and you came to the gig. And then a couple of days after the gig, Sherwood Ball, who was in my band, one of the singers and guitar players, so Sherwood said, Cherston had started a web page for you. He said, you know how cool that is? I said, well, yeah, it's cool. And she knows more about me than I do. I mean, literally. She's found. So, anyway, Cherston had set up the website and we started communicating a lot. And I mean a lot. And this was like, in 1994, starting then. And she basically runs my life. She's the senior VP of my record company. She takes care of everything for me. I mean, she's like unbelievable. And she was a librarian for years in a college, and her organization skills are beyond belief. When you go to my website, you'll see, like I say, the credits, she doesn't miss anything. I mean, even now, she'll find an album release that we didn't know existed, all this stuff. And without her, I'd be in big, big trouble. So we're all one big family here,
So just to come back to like how you guys met, then she basically she had that web page set up, and
right.
you were in need of a website, and then
Absolutely.
that's how it came together. Okay, cool.
Yes. Yeah, man. And over the years, we've always stayed like family, And Cherston and Lage have come to the States a few times. And when they come here, I treat them like the king and the queen of Sweden.
Okay.
And Stefan went to school for a while in LA, GIT. What's it called, Stefan?
Musicians Institute, right?
Oh, yeah. That's what it changed to, MI, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So you were in town and we hung out. I took you out to dinner a few times.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, man. Pepe never made it over here, or he would have gotten the same treatment, of course. So, and like back to your mom's, to the webpage, I would have never happened without her. Even though I'm technical and I could have, gotten into the coding, I would have never done it. Thankfully for her, I mean, she is a gold mine. Let me tell you, man, the sweetest person too, bright, whole family's bright. Really bright.
Yeah, good story. Yeah, it's kind of always funny to see how sometimes it's so random, like how you meet people and then it turns out you just match and it just fits, and obviously you guys been working and staying together for a really long time. So
Cherston she doesn't want to be in videos. I mean, it's like she never wants any credit. She never wants to take any credit. It's like, or she would have been in here. I said, come on, sis. I call her sis. I said, come on, sis, jump in. Nah, I don't want to do it. She doesn't want to do it. So, that's everybody's got their groove. I say this every day. Everybody's got their groove. If your groove isn't hurting anyone else, so what? You got your groove. That's fine. That's who you are,
Exactly.
So my groove is I love doing videos and it's hard to shut me up,
And here we are doing a video.
Here we are. And before we bore people to death, I'm going to tell you the story of the E. Are you ready?
Yes, please. Speaking about groove, right? So just to give our listeners a little heads up here. So the E electric piano we're speaking of is an actual hardware instrument, and you have sampled it and made a virtual instrument out of it, basically to use for the computer. And so please go ahead and tell us a little bit about the hardware, the original E piano, what it is, and why it's in so many tracks.
Here goes. Let's start from the very beginning. First of all, Andy Leeds was a guy that owned a rental company, he grew up with Steve Lukather, all the Porcaro brothers, Jeff, Mike, and Steve. And so he was like family already. And then he started this rental business. And the Rhodes was very popular back then. And whenever he found an early 70s model, the Mark I, he would buy it. And he was always looking because there was such a demand for Rhodes. He had 4 at the time, and he was in a music store in Hollywood called Wallach's Music City. That was a very famous music store. And he went in the back with the salesman one day, and he'd never been back there before. He'd only looked around in the main music area, right? But since he was such a good client for the store, they took him back into the storeroom to let him look around to see if there was anything they had that he wanted. Well, they didn't do a very good job of keeping stock, organizing stock, as stuff was piled up to the ceiling. I mean, literally. And Andy Leeds, at the very bottom of this giant pile, saw this big box at the bottom. And he says, "What's that?" And the salesman says, "I don't know." So they said, "Well, let's find out." So they took everything off the pile, they popped it open, and it was what turned out to be the E, a 73 key suitcase model with, internal speakers, right? Okay. It had been sitting there for 9 years, brand new in the box.
Wow.
How about that? That's bizarre, right? Okay. So he bought it, took it back to his shop, and stenciled the letter E on it. He used letters instead of numbers, at least for the Rhodes. And a day or two later, it ended up on a date that David Foster was on. David Foster and I are like brothers. We wrote so many songs together. We worked together all the time. We both played on each other's projects and albums. And so after this session that the E was on, David called me when he got home. And he said, "I just played the best sounding Rhodes I've ever heard." He said, "You're not going to believe it." I said, "Well, how do I identify it?" He said, "It's got an E stenciled on it, call Leeds." So I said, "We have the Giroux album coming up in about a week, so I'll book the E," which I did. And in this very studio that I'm sitting in now, which is Garden Rake, my studio, when David was playing the piano and I was setting the levels on the console behind me, well, it wasn't this console, it was another one, and EQing the instrument, I hit the talkback button in about a minute after I started, and I said, "David, you are right. This is the most incredible sounding E. It's big. It barks if you jump on the low end notes. It's gorgeous. It's just absolutely crystal clear, gorgeous." I couldn't find any fault with it. So then the very first song that we recorded with it is "Mornin'," by the way, which you're going to play in a bit from the Giroux album.
We're going to do that here in a minute, guys.
Yeah. So then, I told everybody about it. I told all the other keyboard players in town. I told everybody. And also the keyboard players other than David that I would hire, like Robbie Buchanan, Michael O'Mardian, Jay Winding, some other guys that would come through. And they all played it and freaked out. So the word was out. And Greg Matheson, who's like a college buddy, man, we've been like brothers since we were 18. Of course, I told Greg, and Greg played on some stuff that I produced, and he loved it. Everybody loved it. After 6 months, the E was so hard to book. I had to book the E 2 months in advance before I even booked the musicians.
Okay.
And the first call musicians were hard to get. They could take up to a month to book. So now all my sessions were based around booking the E. And I'm going, man, this is getting to be a real hassle here, right? But thankfully, I waited for it. I couldn't use another Rhodes. There's no way. None of them were even, all the lead roads, none of them were close. Okay. All right, let's take it a step further now before we actually get into what the E does now with our sample program. Then around 1987, Stefan or Pepe can correct me on this, I don't know the year, the DX7 showed up. And the DX7 had a roads patch. And we typically use two DX7s together and detune one little flat and one little sharp. And that became the new kind of roads sound that everybody used. All of a sudden, the E and the rest of the roads were dust collectors at Leeds Rentals Company. And the same with all the other rental companies. Nobody was renting roads. It was all about the DX7. And we all bought them and, you know. So the roads was like just vanished. In about a period of 4 years, it was there, and then like all roads, it went away. Okay. Somewhere in the 90s, I kind of wondered what happened to it, and I can't remember exactly how I found out, but a guy by the name of George Mamalakis that lives in Santa Barbara bought it. I called him, we talked, he told me the story. He said he loved that roads like everybody else, and he came down from Santa Barbara and asked Leeds if he could play it, and he did. And then he says, I'll give you $3,000 for the roads. And Leeds says, well, it's not being rented anymore. I'll sell it to you. Now, the story gets better. George respected this instrument so much. He didn't want to take it to gigs. He only took it to 3 gigs. It's maybe only been out of his house maybe 8 times. He made like a shrine to it. He only played it at home because he just didn't want to destroy it. Because you move these things around, man, you know, after a while, mechanically, they get bad. And also, George is very good with mechanics, and he's taken that thing apart and put it back together a number of times. Okay. So when memory finally not became an issue anymore, meaning plugins could now be easily 50 gigabyte, you know, hard drives that were a terabyte or, you know, 500 gig, terabyte, whatever. They were cheap and everybody had them. So now that memory wasn't a problem anymore, I called up George 4.5 or 5 years ago, and I said, we have to sample this. Come on, man, we got to do it because the Rhodes is coming back. I'm hearing it on records now. So
yeah, it really is making a big, big comeback.
Maroon 5's current hit uses a Rhodes, and it features the Rhodes, and it's back in a big way.
Yeah.
Okay. Other companies have sampled it, but I'm very anal, and so's George. If I'm going to do something, I do it right. So with all my experience of sampling instruments for Alesis, I know how to sample. Marcus Ryle, who owned Line 6 and did design for Alesis like the ADAT before that, Marcus taught me all about how to deal with digital. In other words, when you truncate something, you've got to cut it right on the 0 point of the waveform or you'll get a click. A lot of information that would bore all the listeners. But anyway, I said, George, we're going to find out every possible sample level that the instrument has, meaning, you know, play as soft as we can, then a little harder, little harder, little harder, little harder. We discovered that there were 18 different sounds, different timbres, I should say.
Okay.
But then I said, George, we can't do this by hand. And the reason we can't sample it by hand is we can't be accurate. So I said, since you're good with mechanical stuff, build something that we can adjust that can strike the keys with something weighted where we can set the weight and get it in very tiny increments. So no more, get it down to increments of around 1/8 of a dB per weighting, right? And I said, you've got to build this out of a case that you can clamp to the Rhodes. You've got to be able to clamp it down so it can't move. Well, since he's good at making this stuff, he built it, and his first attempt was perfect. It blew me away. It's just ridiculously cool. Yeah, it's called Vera, V-E-R-A. And on his website, he may show it. I don't think he's shown how it works, but it's in some of the photographs. Anyway, so since I don't live in Santa Barbara and couldn't commute, I said, George, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. And I wrote him out 100 pages or so in a document that explains everything down to the finite item. And I said, the first thing we do before anything is we change all the capacitors. We get all of the old capacitors out there, but we mark where each one was on a giant schematic. I said, take a big piece of cardboard and write the schematic out, because he had a copy of the schematic that he'd gotten from someone. And I said, just tape each capacitor we take out and replace, so we'll know if the sound isn't right, we can always put things back. The reason for replacing the capacitors is after 15 years, they dry out. So a lot of people go, no, I want the vintage sound. No, you don't. People don't understand. When I would buy a used guitar amp, I would take it to Paul Rivera and I'd say, recap it and go through it in full. The vintage, everything, when it's vintage and you leave it alone, it's beat up. Mechanically, things are wrong, with the Rhodes. And since George's mechanical skills are so good, he always kept the Rhodes perfectly lined up as to the way the tines hit, the key, and so forth. I mean, meticulous, right? And the other companies that sampled these didn't necessarily do it. And there's one company that admits they just left it in vintage shape, thinking people think that's the right thing. It's not the right thing, people. If you learn anything from this today, wrong. You take the capacitors out, old tired components, you replace them with new components, but you keep track of what you took out in case you want to put it back to see if it sounds better. So we did this. We checked in full. So we finally got the E sounding incredibly great. And I also found a bug along the way that's a factory design. If I explained it to you, it would bore the listener, so I'm going to pass. But I'll tell the story some other time if anybody really cares. Very bizarre. We caught the problem, though, by accident, okay?
Okay.
Well, not by accident. It's because I'm so anal. Anyway, so now I said, George, you need to get these converters. You need to get monster cable. You need to get a Peterson strobe. And we're going to find out which channel sounds the best. So you're going to have to bring the Rhodes to my house one more time. And we're going to, no, actually, you didn't have to. I said, just give me both outputs at the same time, and I'll tell you which channel's better. And that's the channel we'll use, because it's going to sound a little different. There's 2 mono outputs, okay? All right. So then it was off to sampling, and George started doing the sampling. 18 layers, 18 different velocities on each key. And we let the notes stain to infinity. So there's no looping, right? So it goes all the way to the end of the note. And we did all kinds of tricks that I'm going to get into. Then after the sampling was done, we needed a partner with somebody. So through another good friend of mine, Chris Poehler, actually Chris Paler, but it spells like Polar, great keyboard player, great arranger, great everything. He says, I've got the company for you, and that's Orange Tree Samples. So if you don't mind sticking up a streamer of either my website or www.orangetreesamples.com, either way, you can get to the link to buy the E. And Chris was right. Greg is brilliant, brilliant. He has mostly sampled guitars, and he does really well. And the sweetest, nicest guy, and just like a genius. He actually coded the 4 choruses that we use on the Rhodes that we'll get into to make them identical to what the originals were. And he's going to code one more soon that Stefan brought up, which Stefan's right. It should be coded, which is the very first boss. We'll let Stefan talk about that in a minute. Okay, so now we've got all the samples at 96K, 24-bit. We give them to Greg. Oh, I also taught George how to truncate. So it came to Greg already truncated. Now it's time to build the engine. And it runs in Contact or Contact Player.
Right.
While we were deciding what to do, as far as effects and total control over the Rhodes. The first thing that I dislike about the Rhodes is the release samples. When you hit a note and you let the note go, there's a little ting to it. Now, what I don't like about that is it sounds like a timed event. So I made sure we did sample the release time separately, because the way George sampled it with the Vera, the key striker, we don't get the release sample because we let it sustain to infinity.
So actually, let's talk a little more detail about the sampling process. So, how did you do it and what equipment did you use? You already mentioned you used the automatic kind of sampling robot, or the robot that would punch every key. And did you have like a few microphones in different positions around it, or how did you do that?
The key to the Rhodes sound is nobody ever mics the speakers, although we are offering a speaker simulation that will be in the next update. I don't like it. It's mid-rangey, it's boxy, it's ugly. It's not good. Everybody records the Rhodes direct. Before we keep going, I have to mention something really bizarre. We were going to call it the famous E Rhodes piano. The Fender, the famous Fender E Rhodes piano. Well, we found out somebody had copywritten the name Rhodes after Harold Rhodes died. And this guy is suing everybody that's used the name Rhodes in their product. And we caught it just in time. Now, everybody knows it's a Rhodes, but as long as we didn't name the product a Rhodes, that's why it's the electric piano, the famous E electric piano, and not the Rhodes. But we all know it's a Rhodes. I mean, this is ridiculous, right?
Yeah, really, it really is.
Something else I have to interject now that's very important. Harold Rhodes, there's been many different models over the years, and the Mark I is for sure the best. I've heard them all, and this is by far the best, and he agrees. Well, he'd heard about the E, and he drove to George's house to listen to George play it, and he played it as well. And afterwards, he said, now I know why everybody raves about this Rhodes. He said, I've never heard one that sounds better. This is the most beautiful sounding Rhodes I've ever heard. That's big.
Yeah, for sure.
Who knows how many thousands of Rhodes he played, right? Okay, the sampling process. Now, like I say, Vera hits the notes with different weights, right? We had a weight adjustment, so it would strike the key very lightly, and it would hit every key at that same velocity, right? And then we just bump up the velocity, the weight just a little bit, so it would hit it harder. Now, we could have gotten 30 or 40 samples out of it, but we only needed 18. So that's how many sample levels we got, because we made sure we got everything we needed. And you say, what was the chain of the process? It was one channel direct out of the Rhodes using Monster Cable, which is very important. Monster Cable Series 1, as M1000 it's called. Sadly, they don't make it anymore because there's no high-end market anymore, and it's too bad. Cable makes a huge difference. Then we ran it, and that's another story and another interview for another time. You won't believe how much of a difference it makes. So then we ran it through good converters. I forget what George had at the time. They could have been Apogee, probably. We're both using Apogee, so it was probably Apogee. And then from the Apogee, we went into Logic, and that's what he uses. So that's how the sampling, that's what we use to sample. Then we truncated it, and like I say, at 96K, 24-bit, okay? What other questions do you have about that part of it?
Why 96K? Why not higher or lower? Doesn't really make sense, but you could go, I don't know, do maybe 192.
We thought about it, and at the time, memory, this is really funny. and Stefan and Pepe are going to crack up when they hear this, because the three of us are tied into Tune Tracks, who makes Superior Drummer. I got tied into it when I told Mateus, one of the owners, that except for one drum, the very first original drum sample program he made, they're all inverted phase. That's because a lot of people don't understand the physics of how acoustic instruments should be recorded. That's a whole other interview for another time. So anyway, I became tight with them then because I'd found that problem, and they reversed the phase of the samples. And Stefan and Pepe have also done work for them on sample programs. And now, why am I bringing this up? What was the reason I'm bringing this up?
Because we were talking about the quality, why you did 69K
right.
instead of 192.
Right, 96K instead of 192.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. At the time, we thought, okay, our program's 9 gig, but Kontakt shoves it down to 3 gig, and I don't know why they bother doing that. If I knew they were going to do that, it would have been at 192, but there was another reason. 9 gig is starting to get into the territory at the time. When we did this 4.5 years ago, well, sample libraries aren't that big. Maybe if we do it, it's going to be too big at 192. So then, about a month later, I get Superior Drummer 3, and it's 256 gigs. I'm going, I told George about a month ago, we ought to sample it again at 192. He says, maybe in some decade farther down the road. I can talk him into it, and I will. And that gets to another issue with Kontakt we're going to talk about at the very end, because Kontakt transfers your sample rate of the sample rate that the instrument is. It renders it down. If you go to 48K or 44.1, it renders it down, and that causes aliasing. But we have a fix. Well, I'm going to tell you now. We have a fix. To get rid of the aliasing, we're going to release 4 other versions. So whatever version, you can have them all. You can have 96, you can have 88.2, 48, 44.1. That's 4. You can have them all. So whatever you're going to use for your project, load the instrument that's the right sample rate, because Kontakt will cause aliasing. And aliasing is high frequency distortion, and it's just not right. So
okay, that's actually interesting. I didn't know that.
The more you talk to me, the more you're going to learn.
There we go.
And while we're at it, we did something else. Okay. When you sample an instrument, okay, let's say Stefan's playing the real E, okay? Okay, he's recording it. Now, of course, the preamp makes noise. You're never going to get a dead quiet preamp, especially one that's built for an instrument like this. It's a quiet preamp, but it's not going to be quiet, right? Okay, every time we sample a note, that's another pass through the preamp. So if you play 10 notes and you let them sustain to the end of the song, the noise floor is going to start coming up and be noticeable right before they die off. So Greg Schlepfer, the genius that owns Orange Tree, ran it through RX Spectral, and without hurting any of the other notes, has the noise floor down to minus 80 dB. It's dead quiet. No other company is doing stuff like this.
Yeah, that's remarkable.
We are anal. We are anal, and we're perfectionists.
Cool. Yeah, that is, I'd actually say before we continue talking about the instrument that you sampled and made with Orange Tree, let's just listen to the song Morning for a little bit now, and we'll hear the original instrument, and then we'll move on to the sampled version, and we'll be able to do some kind of comparison and see how. Yeah, sorry. Real
quickly, Christoph, the old E was recorded the original E was recorded on analog tape, and I added a ton of equalization. I mean like up to 9 bands, because even though it was a great sounding instrument, we thought it was low impedance, and it wasn't. It's only 5,000 ohms, and low impedance can go up that high on a console input. It can accept 500 ohms, 5,000 ohms, but we thought it was way up there, like 17,000. So I ran it through direct boxes. And we ran one side through the boss chorus, which is really noisy, and that is high impedance. So we had one leg coming out direct, the other leg going into the boss chorus, and out of the boss chorus, both legs. All right, we start over. We had one leg from the Rhodes coming out into the mic pre that I was using at the time that was not active. So it darkens up the sound big time. It's a transformer that darkens up the sound big time. And then boss chorus out of the other channel of the Rhodes into the boss chorus, out of the boss chorus into the direct box, then into my console, into the mic input. Both went into the mic input, okay? Now it's dark. It's dark and mushy, but that was our only reference. And also analog tape changes the sound of things drastically.
Right.
And so the Rhodes, when we compare it to Stefan playing the E, you're going to notice our sample version's bigger. And that's because of what happened back in the day. You can make it smaller. If you want the sound of the direct box sound, I can get it for you, but it's not as desirable as it is the way Stefan's using it, for example. So let's listen to Morning.
Cool. Yeah, let's go. So I hope you guys were able to hear the song or the part of the song. It's really beautiful, actually. Like it's got a really nice and warm and smooth sound. And that was the original hardware instrument that was used in that song. And now we actually have the chance to compare the original to the virtual version that UJ created and sampled. And let's take a look at this and run us through. What did you do? What did you create?
Okay, so the main page, we're looking at the front page. That looks good, Stefan. We're looking at the main page, and you can see there's a volume control on the far left, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Then we have 4 tone controls: bass, low mids, upper mids, and treble. And above the treble, there is a little wrench that can be used for a drop down. Now that allows the user to change the frequencies of each of the 4 tone controls, as well as shelf and bell options on the bass and on the treble control. So if you want to access that, that's where you access the frequencies. So we can get out of that mode, Stefan, and we'll go
by
back.
the way, is that the basically the original setup that was recreated, like you know, the interface, or is that did you or the company Orange Tree Samples decide on the design on the interface?
You know, to tell you the truth, I think we did model the tone controls of the bass and treble. Yes, we did. As far as the mids go, we just used what was logical. But now we're on my first page. The best patch, as far as I'm concerned, is my first patch in the presets, Jay Graydon 1. And Stefan's got that set up, but Stefan's done some modifications.
Okay.
But that we both agreed on, and we'll get to those. And so anyway, now you know where the tone controls are on the front page. And to the right of that, we have the tremolo. And you want to turn it on, Stefan, or you just, hit the button. Lights up red. So that's pretty obvious. You've got speed and intensity, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't use the tremolo much until we do an update where we can time it with the DAW.
Yeah.
The reason I don't use tremolo is because if you're close to the beat with the tremolo speed, it really screws with the time of the band. We don't want that. So go ahead, Stefan. Let's turn off the tremolo.
So that'll be in an upcoming update, or is that just an idea for now?
I don't know which. It'll be in one of the updates. It's not a big priority, it seems. There's other stuff we want to do first, but we'll get there. It is a priority. Everything's a priority, but we'll get there. Now that we're back to the main performance page, you can see we have a selection of 4 choruses that were actually written by Greg. And the 4 choruses are on the left pot. I love the logical chorus. That's my choice. But, you know, all the choruses are good, and just choose what you like. But in my case, I like the logical chorus, and that's what we have for my setting. And Stefan kind of tweaked it a little bit and made it sound a little bit mellower, and that's great. So that takes care of the main page. Stefan, good. Go to the next page, effects page. Okay. Stefan, add an effect just to show them how to do it. There's a bunch of effects in there. They're all native instrument effects. We don't have. They're not great stuff. They're not. You know, we're going to get some better updated native instrument plugs in there, and we're also going to try to code a few as well. But I would go with your DAW effects before I'd use any of these. But if you're in a live situation, you can use this stuff. I mean, a delay line's a delay line. It sounds fine. The reverbs sound fine. There's a lot of reverbs. There's all kinds of stuff in there. But like I say, it's contact stuff. We had no control over that. So we can only use contact stuff right now. But like I say, we will update. Stefan, please get rid of that effect and just leave the EQ in. Okay, the reason that EQ is on the top is in, that's on all my patches. And you can see there's a mid-range roll-off at 654 cycles. It's in the center group of 3 controls. And you can see I have a negative EQ set a few dB negative at 654 cycles, whatever it's set to. That's intentional. because what we did end up getting in this, when we sampled it, there's a little too much of that mid-range area for my taste. To me, it sounds like a wah-wah's turned on halfway when it's bypassed. So for me, I like that. That's only my opinion.
Can we actually listen to that comparison?
Yes.
It would be great.
With and without
Steph,
EQ.
Okay.
3. Can we use that?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, now switch the EQ in and out.
Without?
Do it on the round, Stefan. Fine. Okay. You know what? It's actually it's more noticeable.
Okay, that's good. I think we've heard enough.
Sure.
It's more noticeable. It's more noticeable on a lower voice chord, but just look, you still get the drift. It's less mid-range garbage that it's just not, it's a frequency area that's not needed. And ironically, this digital EQ is not a good equalizer at all. But ironically, for the roll-off, it worked great. I tried using a Fab Filter EQ. I tried the front panel setting EQ. Nothing was as good as this equalizer for the roll-off. So that's why I used it.
Okay.
So, and let's go on to the next page, Stefan. That's all we have in the effects page. Now we're on to the advanced page. And there's some really cool stuff here. For example, look at the far left. There's a custom velocity curve that you can adjust to your playing. You just drag on that line and it changes the velocity to your touch.
That's
now,
cool,
Stefan,
actually.
What's that?
That is actually pretty cool.
Very cool. Now, other than that, show them the next part, Stefan. Show them the choices that you have if you don't want to use that.
Yeah. For my keyboard, I was using the semi-weighted action. Seemed to be working okay. I have a Nord stage 2.
You're a piano player, okay? I'm not. And for guys like me that play plastic keys, I have a Yamaha motif with plastic keys with very easy action. I need it like that. So what's cool about this, the custom curve, velocity curve, is you just set it anywhere you want for your feel. This is really a great feature. Makes all the difference in the world, man. You know?
I've actually never seen a feature like that in any other instrument. Like, sometimes they give you the option to set the velocity, but, it's usually like in some type of a range, maybe between, I don't know, 0 and 120 or whatever. But this is actually pretty cool. And I assume it's like emulated at the same time, right? So semi-weighted will actually kind of make it sound like the keys are actually semi-weighted.
If you play that way, it all depends what your touch is. If your touch is hard, like if you're a piano player and you have it on synthesizer action, it's going to be way too bright. So that's what it's there for, your own touch. It's for yours. You see?
Yeah, I get it now. Okay. But still really cool.
It is really cool. I begged for that, and we all agreed it was a good move. Okay. Now,
probably one of the most important features of any sampled instrument is to be able to adjust the velocity curve. Because the way you play affects the way it sounds. So you can't really correct sound if the velocity, if the instrument doesn't respond the way you play. Right.
Stefan, now you can save a patch at any time. So let's save this as Stefan something.
Stefan one.
Okay, now if we change anything at any time, we can always go back and either write another patch or overwrite that patch. It's up to the user. So I'm constantly saving as I go along because I don't want to lose any settings that I've liked, right? Okay, what's on the top upper left next to the velocity curve in the effects window, in the advanced window? What is that, Stefan?
The stretch tuning.
Okay, so for piano, when you're playing with a sample program, if the piano is tuned stretch, you play like a C 2 octaves below middle C, and then maybe 3 octaves above middle C, and you use that stretch tuning pot to match the piano's pitch. So let me back up. The first thing you do is make sure it's in tune with the piano by playing middle C, or even 2 C's down, C minus 2, whatever you call it. That's when the stretch is going to come into play the farther you go up on the keyboard. So if the Rhodes is out of tune with no chorus in, and you need to match the piano stretching, that's the pot you use, because it will make the instrument track sharper the farther it goes to the right, just like stretch tuning on a piano.
Right.
This is important, man. So it will be perfectly in tune with a piano that's stretch tuned.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Now the next one down, the next knob down, this is the coolest thing ever. There's not been a Rhodes that I know of that is actually allowed for a stereo mode like a piano. When you mic a piano, you use 2 mics on it to create a left, center, and right sound and everything in between, right? Okay. With the E, you can make it a stereo instrument. It's no longer a mono instrument. Can you show us that, Stefan?
Yeah. Well, let's show the setting in the middle first.
The middle is mono. So both outputs, it's just like a stage model, a suitcase model would be. There's no panning. It's just a mono sound like all Rhodes, right? Now, if you play from left to right, it's just mono. So now let's make it stereo. You jack it all the way out. Now go to your setting, Stefan. Go to your setting. Now play a chromatic scale, please, from the bottom up. It's now a stereo instrument, which is so cool. So if you're playing with a piano, the Rhodes is going to go with the piano. It's going to pretty much go in the same position as the piano. So it takes up less room in the track, and it's in constant movement no matter where you're playing. It's stereo, true stereo for a change. Isn't that great?
Yeah, that's a really interesting feature.
Let's go down with the next one down is just a CPU setting. If you're running a lot of plugs, you'd want to you want to leave it at high, because the choruses will be more reactive. Only go down if you have to medium or low, but we leave it at high. As long as the computer isn't choking and your DAW isn't choking, leave it there. Let's go to the next bank, Stefan. Top right. What's that?
Sustain pedal split point.
That's how does that actually work, Stefan?
I only have a switch sustain pedal, so I don't really use that feature. I guess you
It's
could
a
adjust it.
it's a sensitivity control for a volume pedal, for a sustain pedal, right? It just changes how far you have to press the pedal.
Okay.
And
If you have you can use that if you have a continue.
Right.
Okay.
Like I always leave it in the center because it's normal where it is. But if you go to the right or the left, the sustain pedal will either react quicker when you touch it or slower, depending on where that's set.
Okay. So the sensitivity basically that you're adjusting. Yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
Now we come down to a very interesting feature. I had this added on purpose. I don't like the release samples. And the release sample was an accident. The way the Rhodes was designed, obviously Harold Rhodes couldn't figure out a way to not have the note, bang up and hit the tine again when you release it. It's a very annoying sound to me. If you like it, you like it, but I don't. So, and if Harold Rhodes could have gotten rid of it, he would have. So what I had asked Greg to add was to turn off the release sample and have a decay pot for how you want the Rhodes to decay. Now, if you're playing with an acoustic piano, for the New York Grand Contact piano, I found that its exact match of decay is 163 milliseconds. So I would set that pot to 163 milliseconds. Stefan and I both like it where he's got it set right now, which is around 12 o'clock, as it has a natural decay. And it has the basic decay of what a Rhodes would have. And I'm sure both Stefan and Pepe agree with that, right, guys?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sweet spot.
So if we put an acoustic piano in contact over here under the Rhodes, and we had them both playing together on the same MIDI channel, then you would adjust that release to the amount of the release that the acoustic piano has. So that's really important, because if they're not releasing at the same time, it's ugly and it's very noticeable. So with this, you can get rid of that problem. So it's another feature that I don't think anybody's added, but I made sure we had it because I knew this was going to be a problem without it. Okay, and one more to go.
What is the difference between the fade out and the sample switch? So the sample is like the original with the kind of noise that's coming in again when fading out, or what are
It's the note release. If you hit a note fast, fairly quick and release it, you'll hear a dink at the end of the note.
And
right?
You only get that with when it's set to samples.
Right.
Okay.
And we had and Christoph, we had to record all the release samples because originally we weren't going to use them because we didn't like them. But the other people might like them. So we're an intelligent company. We want to give the user every option they have. Whether I like it or not, they should have it. So they have it. So you've got a choice of either way you want to go.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
On that issue, I must say that those release samples that you have for the E, they are comparatively with other sampled pianos. They are very clean. They are not very noisy or clanky if you compare to other pianos. So if you like release samples, they sound pretty good.
You know why? Because the mechanics, Pepe, the mechanics of the way George has the Rhodes set up, meaning he's got the mechanics set up perfectly. That's why it doesn't sound like trashy, like Rhodes that aren't maintained. I never thought of that until you brought it up. And you are right.
I've spent much time trying to to adjust dampers. It's so difficult. It's
exactly.
to get rid of that clank that falls.
Well, you either totally have gotten rid of it if you use the decay mode, or if you want the samples in. If you like them, Pepe, do you like the release samples? Do you use them?
Sometimes, yes, for some sounds.
There you go. If you want them, you have them. If you don't want them, they go away. And you can have adjustability of over how long the decay is, which is just great. Now, the last feature, and both Pepe and Stefan know this very well. On the original E, at this particular run of instruments, this model, there are 9 hammers with different hardness. They're harder than the other hammers. And to tell you the truth, I don't know why Harold Rhodes did that. Now, originally, when in the morning version you played with David Foster playing that double gliss at the beginning of the tune, it sounds very smooth. The bell notes don't stick out. I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, from B above middle C through G above middle C is when the bells are on, the bell notes are on. You'll hear their different sound. Stefan, you want to click that switch? And then when you do an audio demo, play like around it chromatically below it, starting from middle C, and then go up 2 octaves and then come back down so they can hear the difference of the bell notes.
Yeah, we can do that, sure.
Yeah. Now on the E, they weren't overkill on the original E, but for some reason or another, I don't know how this happened. They don't sound good to me anymore. So we stretch some notes to get rid of it. I leave them off, but that's up to the user. If you like it, you use it. If you don't want to use it, you don't use it. That's that simple.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's much more even without them, but there's a certain, now, Pepe and Stefan, do you guys like the bell samples?
Yeah, I think they sound for some things. For some things,
Good
they sound
answer.
really good. Yeah.
Stefan?
Me too. I think for some songs they sound better. For some songs sound better without. So it totally depends on what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. If you notice that, Christoph, when you've played with the piano, did you notice that? Did you get to that?
Actually, I haven't really gotten much into the advanced section yet. I've played around with the velocity, but I actually haven't checked out the bell register yet. So,
it's really important that I'm explaining all this stuff in the advanced section because it's a lot of this is new. It's really cool stuff. Really cool.
And it's just nice, to have the option. And, same with the samples and the fade out. It's just nice to, just to have that option there and to know if I actually wanted maybe the original way or whatever, then I can do that still.
It's all about the user, period. I want the user to have every option we can give them. We're not the user, we play different. So the user is going to have his own choice of what he wants, and that's the way it should be. And every company should think that way.
Okay, cool. So thank you all for the demo of the famous electric e-piano. It was really cool to see. It was really cool to get a view behind the curtain and see how all the sampling worked and what you did, because obviously you've been at it for quite a while and it takes a lot of work. And we're also coming towards the end of our podcast. So if you guys still want to add anything to the piano, this would be a good time, I guess. And yeah, thanks again for your time. And if there's anything important you think our listeners should know about the instrument, then feel free to drop that now.
Okay. Let's start with Peppy. What's the E mean to you, buddy?
Yeah, it's a great, timeless sound, one of a kind. And since I've been trying to get this sound, I've been looking for it in trying to make real pianos sound like this, and looking for samples. I never found it until now. It's totally a unique piano. You cannot recreate this with any other piano. It doesn't work.
Okay.
So that's it's a completely unique instruments.
Stefan?
Well, I think that for any type of music, everything counts as far as sound goes. And maybe I didn't realize that, but when I was listening to these records that Jay had recorded, say back in the 70s and 80s, there was this, the electric piano sound that was on every track. And it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly what sounds so good about each track. Of course, with Jay Graydon, everything sounds great because he wants everything to sound great. But there's this attention to detail that really makes a difference in the end. And I think the famous E captures the essence of that electric piano sound. Also, it feels really, really good to play on. And that's a very, very important feature of any virtual instrument, I think.
Yeah, good point.
All I can say is when I first heard this thing, after, David Foster called me after he played it, and then a week later we were recording with it on the Giro record. And all I can say is I was floored. Or why would I have waited 2 months to have to book it when it got so popular? I never said I'm just going to book another Rhodes. I never, ever would even have considered that. This thing, there's just nothing like it. And Harold Rhodes said it perfectly. It's the most beautiful sounding instrument I ever heard. And what we have done with this and given the user all these options and this new concept of things like having it stereo and just doing everything we could to make it sound even better than it did and more flexible. I'm really proud of the job we did. So on behalf of me, George Mamalakis, and Greg Schlepfer, who owns Orange Tree Samples, if you love the Fender Rhodes sound, this is the one for you.
Cool. Sounds good. Yeah. Well, thank you too. Thanks for your time, guys, and for coming on here and for talking about the Rhodes and the original instrument, filling us up here with some information and taking us through your plugin that you sampled and the process. And it was really interesting. So thanks again for taking time, especially you, Jay. I don't know, it's probably like 6 a.m. in the
exactly.
Yeah, there we go. So
it's actually 7 a.m. for me because I don't change my clocks when it goes off daylight savings time.
Okay,
that's how weird I am. I'm weird. I get an hour extra this way, the way I see it. But
there you go. Yeah, well, it's about time for breakfast then, I guess.
Yeah. By the time, hey, listen, man, we're on a similar schedule. And by the way, Christoph, I forgot to mention this. I'm mostly German Dutch. I come from a family by the name of Dosh and Wetzel on the Amsterdam side. So we have a lot in common, man. We're both control freaks.
There we go. Now we have it. Now we have it, guys.
It's the German technology of thought. Thank you so much, guys. Thank everybody. I thank everybody so much.
Yeah, thanks
Thank you.
everyone. And it was really good talking to you guys.
Great fun, man. All right, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, take care, guys.
Take care.
So thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you guys had fun and enjoy the talk. Maybe you get to take away something, and maybe some of you even have a chance to sample a piano or other instruments yourself. And now you kind of know, especially when it comes to pianos, I guess, what to watch out for. And yeah, so I hope you guys had fun, and you'll hear from me again in 2 weeks. Until then, have fun, make music, and stay healthy, guys.